All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Wishart, and I'm here with my colleague Joe, who I'll let introduce when we get to his section. The purpose of this session is to give you guys an introduction to a really exciting product launch that we've had for our database observability with Amazon CloudWatch. And really excited that this capability will support customers operating on Amazon Aurora or RDS databases. And just for additional context, if you have any questions during the course of the session, feel free to uh, provide your questions in the chat, and then Joe and myself will be able to speak to it or message answers as we go along. All right. First off, for the agenda, we'll walk through the customer challenges that we typically see. Then we'll give a quick introduction to database insights along with specific use cases and how you can get started before we give the session to Joe to conduct a demo. So as it relates to managing your databases, with customers we see having a wide variety of database instances, and it becomes pretty challenging to manage these different databases with the different types of telemetry, which can be increasingly complex from an observability perspective. And additionally, from correlating your infrastructure with your application, that can make it very hard to identify when an issue has occurred, what the issue is, and how to eventually resolve it, which increases your mean time to resolution, or MTTR. And thirdly, customers are seeing their workloads sprawling with different tools, and so the time to go from one tool to another can be challenging as well. And finally, not everyone has deep database expertise, and so being able to have tools that can help alleviate the learning curve is increasingly important for our customers today. So, given these concerns from our customers, we've launched Database Insights. And with Database Insights, it's a great tool for DevOps engineers, database administrators, or application developers to troubleshoot database issues from the database to the application layer. And that can be done not just with Database Insights, but also with our application signals, which complements the database monitoring that you'll see today. And then secondly, being able to have a fleet-wide view of your database environment at the fleet level, as well as at the instance level. All right, so here's some screenshots, and Joe will be able to show you firsthand how this operates. But really excited that with Database Insights, it provides a consolidated view of your telemetry with your databases in a unified CloudWatch dashboard, where you can have configurable insights across your fleet and instance level telemetry, and you can drill down into specific SQLs that might be problematic for your operations. I've already mentioned how you can correlate the database operations with your application performance. And what's really excited is that this is a fully managed experience with an out-of-the-box dashboard to understand the health of your databases and identify those problematic areas of your operations. So several more screenshots just to drill a bit deeper. Here you have visibility in the fleet view. So in the top left corner, you can see you can toggle between fleet and database instances. And then you can see which databases might be most problematic by looking at the top database by load utilization. And as you look lower on the screenshot, you can identify if there's any alarms or events that are problematic for your database environment that could impact your customer-facing applications. And then you can toggle between different types of metrics to get a sense of, which databases might have concerns with latency or utilization. And at the very bottom, you can see any alarms that should be brought top of mind for your awareness. And then if you drill down into the instance view by toggling on the top left, here you can get some visibility into what are the top contributors to your database load by certain SQL queries, the top users, top hosts, and also you can have a consolidated access to your metrics, logs, traces, and events, as shown in this next screenshot here. Wherever you toggle to database telemetry, here's where you can toggle between looking at your database by metrics, logs, and other types of telemetry data. And this is great to help you do some advanced root cause analysis and correlate different types of data without having to go through different pages or dashboards to get access to it. So that's a quick high-level view of some of the screenshots of how the UI UX will look. And then before I pass it to Joe, just want to quickly recap. Some of the key use cases with Database Insights is doing fleet monitoring, where you can get an aggregated view across your entire fleet and down to a specific instance regarding the health and utilization. And this is great when Database Insights is paired with application signals to do expedited troubleshooting. And this is ideal for customers, whether they are DevOps professionals, database administrators, or application developers to understand what is the root cause of latency for their customer-facing applications, which will ultimately help your business. And lastly, this is a great way to drill down into specific SQL queries that might be impacting the performance of your database load and performance. And we'll share this information after the meeting, but we have online resources where you can learn more about Database Insights, whether it's our official documentation or blogs. And then also, we do have the ability for you to try out Database Insights as well, so that way you can get your hands dirty and get access to this functionality. So now we'll embark on the demo with my colleague Joe. During the course of the demo, before you head out, we like to see how we perform with these webinars and want to make sure that they're value add to our viewers. So if you have some time, and we'll share this link again at the end, but if you have some time before you head out to provide feedback to the survey, it's great for us to know how we're doing and if and where we need to improve. So with that, I'll take a pause and I'll pass the baton to my esteemed colleague, Joe.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Aliotto. I'm going to share my screen here and I'll do a little introduction in just a second. Make sure you see my screen before I do anything else. All right, I just shared my screen. Can anyone put a thumbs up, a yes, a Y, anything in chat just to make sure you can see my screen? Awesome. Thanks, Alex. All right, brief introduction. My name is Joe Aliotto. I've been with Amazon for about 3 years, going on 3 years. I've been in the IT industry doing everything from like SMBs, installs, rack stacking, cabling, business, all the way through enterprise and going into the cloud space. I've been doing IT for about 22 years, and I'm excited to kind of walk through this with you today. So let's just dive in. I just want to show you what we have. So first, Database Insights is within CloudWatch. So I'm going to just jump in there, and I'm going to show you where we get to this. Okay. And then from there, on the left-hand pane, under Insights, there is Database Insights. So I'm going to go to that. And now you can see what I have here. I'm going to explain the pane, and we'll start going through just what the layout is, and we'll move into some use cases and look at some things that are happening on our database. So first of all, we have like our fleet health here. You can see I have a fleet of database instances. And I can see right now either an alarm or database load state. I have a few in alarms. We'll probably look at those a little bit later. You can tell them by the red, hexagon or honeycomb. And then we have the 6 ones that are in OK state and one without. Maybe that's something we should look into at another time. Additionally, we have it broken down by database load, right? Where if you want to say, okay, I know that, I'm seeing some performance issues, there's some latency, our front-end application isn't responding as it needs to be. We need to find out why. People think it's the database, where we're trying to dive deeper into that. So this could give you an idea of how to manage that. Well, this is really a small subset from what we see for some of our, really large customers that have like hundreds or thousands of databases in their fleets. And so from that standpoint, like trying to find the specific database can actually be a little bit difficult if you're just trying to click on these and find them. So what we have in this fleet health view is we have this filter by properties, where you could choose the specific instance name or cluster or these other, attributes you can pull on. But one of the things I think is the most powerful is if you have a proper tagging strategy in place and you tag your resources, you can find it that way. And I think that's what we're going to do. What I'm going to do is I got a call from someone on our development team saying the development environment is slowed down significantly, and we need to take a look as to why. They think it's related to the database. They've looked at some of the other systems in between, but they're just seeing significant latency. And so I want to key in on those. So for environment, I'm going to go ahead and go to dev, and that brings us to these systems. Additionally, if I wanted to say, hey, there's a specific dev service I'm looking at, like the reporting service or the retail service, I'm going to go ahead and do the retail service. And if you notice, it's showing me more now. And the reason is that because there's a little operator over here. So you could do or, you could have things being, sharing both of those characteristics, or and, which is going to have to match both of those. Additionally, you can save that fleet, so which I'll do now. And I'm going to put dev retail service. And so now that I saved that fleet down here in the future, if I think it's related to that specific fleet, I could just go ahead and select the box related to that, or I could search for the fleet by the fleet name in the same way. So that just makes it easy if you have a large fleet of instances to identify which instances you need to focus on or to group them. So when you want to in the future do some troubleshooting, you can jump right to those. All right. So now that we have our fleet, let's kind of take it what else is on this homepage. So we already looked at this instance state summary with load and alarms. Looks like this one specifically, this dev instance, this is our writer instance, is under heavy load, significant load. We can see that that's increased over here as well, right? So for this fleet of these instances, we have this DB load utilization. It's pretty clear that this specific instance is under significant load. We can see some top queries that are causing that load, as well as potential wait events. Can also see different events that are occurring with this. We don't have anything specifically here right now. Also, something that we're going to look at, how we kind of do the full end-to-end observability, integrating this with not just our database observability, but with our application performance monitoring tool, Application Insights, and so that we'll be able to see traces end-to-end and see what's going on. And I'm going to open that now, but we're going to jump into that a little bit later. And then we just have some top instance metrics, very common things that you would want to look at for your fleet: CPU, freeable memory, connections, read and write, and latency. Just you can kind of choose what you want. And then additionally, we have this RDS instances view where you can sort by these specific characteristics, where in this example, if you were looking at your whole fleet and you wanted to sort and then you wanted to find an instance, you could do the same type of thing, right? Okay, so let's go back to this dev fleet and let's take a look at what's going on in this instance. So this is where the UI is going to change a little bit. I'm going to collapse this navigation bar on the left. We don't really need to look at that now. But what we have here is we have like the base load at the top, and we can slice this by a bunch of different characteristics. We're going to do this in a minute. And I just kind of have to work my way down so that it'll complete the story. So we can view it in bar view or line view. You can see the different operations related to what we're sliced by, which we'll see in a minute. And then we can also see for this specific instance, we have this alarm, and this is where our threshold is down at the bottom for what we set for the DB load relative to CPU. We're way above that, so we need to find out why. All right, so from within there, we have this load analysis tab, which we're going to kind of go through this first. And then we're going to move to the consolidated telemetry tab, where we have all of the telemetry like logs, metrics, and other like query performance in there. Additionally, some performance analysis, like some snapshot in time performance reports that we can take. And then this is tying it back to the application performance monitoring, like end-to-end service. What service is running on this database, right? And let's take a look at that. But let's start with DB load analysis to dive in here. I can carve this up in different ways. We will look at locks, just not with this database at this time. But so top SQL, what are the top SQL queries that are running today? And so I can see there's this specific query here. I want to figure out a little bit more about what's going on here. And so now that I've selected that query, it created the filter for me. And I want to understand what service or application is running this, right? What's running this query? Oh, I can see that there's two different ones. I have this order service and this retail service that's a dev lambda, which, okay, we can see that there's a lot of fluctuations with this lambda. So maybe that's something we want to look at. Additionally, you can carve it up by host. So if you wanted to find the specific systems that are making that specific query, making that call, you can see the different systems, see what load. We can see pretty consistent one here, and we see some variations based on these two other hosts. That's where we could start to dive in and say, okay, which one of these systems is causing the most load? Let me go ahead and see what's happening on that system specifically. All right, you can also check out the user. So you can see what users are running it. This is just the order service, so nothing too crazy going on here. But if there were specific users that were running these and causing this, like someone internally running some queries that they left, are running long, you'd be able to identify them as long as they have a specific username there. And so that the way this works is you can kind of slice it by what you want to see, right? You can same thing here. If we move over to weights, it's kind of like a shift. Or actually, let's go to hosts. So I can see this host specifically is generating the most load. And then I can start to carve it up by what I want to see, what application is causing this. Oh, there's something related to DB operations happening on this host. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I need to see what's causing that, right? And I can take a look at users. Oh, I can see that the DBA intern user is doing something on this system. Right, so if I wanted to, I could go back to users here, see DBA interns doing something. Actually, let me clear that. I can see it's not a major contributor, but like there's a good amount of performance, good amount of sessions there. Maybe I just want to investigate what this is as well. And so I could take a look at what queries that user's running. And this one's doing a select all from orders, but it looks like he's continuously doing it. So he must have done something where he has a continuous query going on across multiple sessions, and maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Where is that running from? Let's see. Oh, he's doing it specifically on this host. So I know he's on this system running those queries, and maybe that's something I need to follow up with and, just say, hey, you need to stop that. Let's talk about some best practices if you're going to test things. Okay. And then the rest of these, I'm not going to go through each one, but it's kind of carving it up in the same way, where you can choose what's most important to you based on what we have here, right? You can select it, filter that out, and then start to carve it by the different sections that are most important to you to identify what the cause of your issue may be. All right, let's move to the telemetry. So under database telemetry, this is where we've compiled, common telemetry that we've heard from our customers and from our own experience working with databases, at scale, are important to understand what's going on with this database instance. Things like CPU utilization, free memory bytes, IO latency milliseconds. You can also add additional widgets to this page, but this is just out of the box. You don't have to build any of this, configure any of this. You just enable database insights, and we start collecting all of this telemetry for you. Okay. Additionally, you can view logs that are going on from here. So if you were at the instance, you wanted to look at the logs, you could start going through the logs on the specific instance. You could also do some more advanced analytics with log insights, to where you can run some like more impactful queries of what's happening on that database. And you could also live tail this. So if you were receiving errors or any type of issues related to performance or things just not working correctly on your database, you could do that. I'll pop that open. We'll come back to that as well. And then we also have slow queries. And so if you are running specific queries on this instance that may be slow, we'll start to collect patterns of the queries that you're running, getting how often they're running, and give you some details around how long those are running. It makes it just a bit easier to identify what are long running queries, what specifically are they running for those various patterns, and which ones may be queries that you need to optimize. Right? And that's just all out of the box. Additionally, we have events like we mentioned before, and then we have the processes. So if you wanted to see what's going on, what's taking up the most CPU memory, what PIDs they're running on, and you want to run some additional queries locally to understand what's happening, you could do that. All right, moving on to performance analysis. So this is where you could take a snapshot in time of what's happening with the database. So I'm going to run that. That takes just a second. While that's running, I'm going to kind of come over here. And so for this database, I have this as a part of my application performance monitoring, or like our full end-to-end observability. And I already opened up that tab previously, but this is where I can see that there are specific services or operations that are calling this database. We can see what the average latency of those are, and the volume of requests, if there's faults or errors, specific operations, which we'll dive more into why that's unknown. And we can start to understand what's happening with our application. So let's view the performance analysis report. So as I mentioned, this is a snapshot in time of when with the performance of the database. And as you can see, it lists some database information, the start time and the end time for the analysis, the specific insights here. You can do the same thing, the bar, line type graph, whatever you prefer. You can slice it by those same things that we saw before, those different sections, session types, application, database. And then it can give you some analysis recommendations. There's persistent high database load. It gives you a high-level analysis and some things to look into regarding that. Additionally, you can tag these, so if you want to reference them more easily later, you can. Okay. So kind of coming back to here, this is at a high level what database insights is and how you manipulate, work through the console. I'm going to go and just kind of show the APM and some of the traces that do the end-to-end, but then I'm going to come back and talk about locks and show you how you can identify what's causing locks on the database and how you can look through that for your databases. So let me go ahead and close this. All right, so when I jumped to
Joe.
Go ahead. Yes.
Oh, sorry. One quick question from Alex. He asked if the calling services section showed different ECS services, for example, distinct from the database user.
Yeah, I mean, it can. It depends on how you've configured your telemetry to send as a service. So like if you're running on ECS, for example, and you're calling the database, as long as you're sending that telemetry to application signals, it's going to know based on what traces are sending, where the data is going, and then be able to see that in here. For this example, it's just Lambda, but it could be ECS, it could be EC2, you could be running things on EKS, whatever form of compute, as long as you instrument your code in the way or use some of the auto instrumentation that we have today, you would be able to see it here. Not just services. I have services specifically here, but if you had specific operations you were sending that you wanted to track more specifically, you could see those as well. Yeah, my pleasure. All right, so I'm going to go to application signals so we can kind of look to it at an end-to-end what it looks like. And then we're going to jump back and talk about locks in just a minute. Okay, so once we clicked on the service, we come in here and we're able to see, high level what's going on with this retail dev service. Just so you know, I'm not going to spend a ton of time in application signals because we want to talk about database insights. I just want to showcase how you can kind of see end-to-end what's happening. And so from here, you get an idea of what's happening. We see there's something unhealthy. There's some dependencies, nothing with faults, but some dependencies here. You have some high-level telemetry that you can carve by like P99, 90, and 50. This is by latency and service, and some other information. But let's look at some of those service operations. Okay, so when I'm looking at this, I have those two service operations we saw before, where there's the Lambda service, which has an SLO, which is like a service level objective, saying, you can carve those specifically by, which I'm going to open up, by the specific service operation. You can carve it out by availability of your service or latency. And if you hit those specific, if you hit those specific thresholds, then you can create an alarm that can notify you, hey, we're approaching our SLO of like 99.5 or 99.9 availability, but we haven't breached it yet, but we need to look into what's happening and how we can fix that. And so this can help you before you have issues to identify, you're starting to have an issue. Let's address it before a customer notices the impact. And it keeps your applications running well for your users. So something I noticed, this doesn't have an SLO, but I do see that latency is higher for these, right? These P99 latency, 90, 50, it's significantly higher. Oh, no, sorry, I had it opposite. But we don't see any requests or fault rates. But let me go ahead and select this. I'm going to just select this top one here. Let's see what we see. And when I select that point on the latency, it's going to give me this correlated spans. And so if I select this, what it's going to do is it's going to show me end-to-end from the client going to my API gateway, hitting my Lambda service, right? We hit the context, the function, and then it's calling the Postgres database. It gives us some additional information over here, which we'll look at in a second. But the thing that I think is a little bit more impactful, I'm going to see. No, it's too small. But what I want to show here is as you go through this, this telemetry is actually automatically instrumented. Specifically with using Lambda, there's a checkbox where you can enable sending the data to application signals. We can see the various aspects of the service being called, like walking through the map. When the retail service is called, we can actually see the Postgres SQL, right? We can see that specific line item in here, and it shows us it's on this database. It gives you some additional information about it. If I move over to the SQL tab, I can see the actual query that was running as a part of that trace. There are a few other things you may notice, like these unknown operations. Some of this has to do with the instrumentation with the modules that are running for the application, specifically for how they report to their through OTel or Open Telemetry. And so for this, even though it says unknown operation, what you'll notice is this is actually a connect, and it's making a database connection, right? And this is just related to the actual PG module that I'm using in Node.js and how it reports it with our auto instrumentation. And additionally, this other unknown service, even though it says unknown, you can see that this is when it's doing a DNS lookup, right? And so there is that additional information in here, but this gives you the ability to kind of look end to end for your clients, what's happening. And if there is increased latency, you'll start to be able to troubleshoot as to why. And if there was something with the API gateway, you could potentially see a red icon here or an orange one if there's some other issues down the way. All right. So let's go back to Database Insights, which is where we wanted to be. And we're going to take a look at a couple other things. So from this standpoint, we wanted to take a look at locks. Locks are a common thing. Identifying locks and being able to understand why they're happening is something we hear a lot from our customers. And so what I'm going to look at is I know that there are some locks occurring on a reports DB because I heard that there were some issues and some records weren't being able to be updated. And so to me, that tells me, hey, potentially there's some locks. Someone's holding on to something and we need to find out why. So what I'm going to do is the same thing we did before. I know our report server is in prod, and I know we have the report service. And so I'm going to do that. I have my specific nodes. I'm thinking this is probably when it was happening because I heard that not happening anymore, but it was happening maybe about an hour ago. And that's happening on this prod instance. Okay, so let's see if I find the prod instance. There we go. All right. So about an hour ago, maybe a little longer than an hour ago now, customers said, or some of our internal team said that they were having some issues with reporting. And so we want to dive a bit deeper into that. So I'm going to focus on this section here. You don't really need anything else. I'm going to just bring that to the front. So now that I have that, before we go to the lock analysis, we kind of want to see what's happening, right? We see these weights, we have these different locks that are occurring, right? And we want to understand why or where, how those are happening, right? And so what we could do, we see those are all related to this specific SQL statement. So I'm going to select that. And then we're going to start to kind of dive down. We know what the SQL is. The blocking SQL is going to match because those are the requests that we were seeing. There's commit. It's not much of anything. There's that none, but specifically this one seems to be the most impact, right? This specific one where when you're updating something in shipped, where an order ID is something, we want to understand what that is. And so what we can do is, we can also look at the session. We can grab the session ID. So if we identify a specific section when something's happening, we can grab what those IDs are, and we can focus just on those areas. And then blocking object. So coming back to the SQL, we know that this is the majority of the SQL queries where we're experiencing this issue. And this is where you can get an idea. So like for this area, right? Like if I'm looking at this is specifically demo database. So where update orders set shipped to that number where order ID is 13. That's what I'm looking at. And so I have an idea of, where that is occurring or I should say what SQL statement it's occurring on. And then you can kind of dive down from there. Additionally, if I take this and I go to the 925, 926 area, I can start digging into the actual lock tree that outlines some of the issues and what's happening with the locks and dig deeper, right? Where we can see what the wait event is, what the blocking time was, and just, keep expanding the tree, finding those specific session IDs, and then you can start to troubleshoot what's going on. It did clear up, but if you need to understand why, you can start to do that here and have that information. Okay. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier was that if you did have some sort of issue, you could live tail the logs of the server, right? And so for this one, I popped this open earlier for our dev PostgreSQL cluster, specifically for this reader instance. And I'm going to go ahead and start this. And as that gets going, the way that I got here again was the telemetry, the logs, and specifically for the application logs for that server, I kicked off this live tail. Let me close this. So we start to get our logs flowing through here. Within this, we can start to add specific things. So I know order service in there. Let's say that I was looking for something with query. And so that starts to highlight that section of that specific log. So I can dive into the logs and I can see the query statistics, right? I can find that keyword lost. Here's another one. So connection to client lost, fatal. Oh, maybe that's something we need to understand why that's happening. You can just start using any keywords that you may think can help you find the reason for those specific issue, right? And it takes any text you want. So if I was looking for queries where we're doing a where statement and we wanted to see, you could go in there, see what those specifically are. These are pretty basic, but I think you get the idea that it makes it easy if you're needing to go through the database logs, that you can find those specific keywords very easily. And it just kind of shortcuts you from having to scan through all the logs to finding what you need very quickly as it's occurring, and then being able to focus your attention where it's needed without having to, read through everything, especially if you have some more complex queries and a massive amount of different queries that are running on that specific database. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and cancel that. All right, so at a high level, I guess, kind of going back through this, what we talked about today is how we have database insights as our fleet-wide database observability platform, right? How you can filter your specific fleets by, different attributes, whether that's related to like the instance, the cluster, the engine, the various tagging that you may have in place to make it easier to see what's going on there. You can have some just out of the box dashboards and integrations with different telemetry for metrics, logs. If you implement it with our application performance monitoring, also have traces in that telemetry to help solve like the end-to-end problems of what's going on with those databases, right? As well as, having those alarms that you can be notified if you're approaching, and being able to carve out what your different causes of load are by what's important to you, right? And if you have any insight on other things you think you may want to see, we would love to hear that as a part of the feedback as well, because anything that you roll up today, we're going to take straight to the product team. And so from there, you can look at the analysis. We talked about how there's the specific telemetry for the database where we get a little bit more deep than the front page, that these are just built out of the box as well. We have the performance analysis reports as well as the calling services. So from here, RDS, what I'd like to show you is how do you enable this? I think that's good to understand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to two ways. Actually, I'll just go into an instance that I have today. And so I will go ahead and just go to retail prod, this cluster. I am going to modify this cluster. And then within here, there is a section, which I just search for in monitoring, where there's database insights advanced or standard. And so the standard has retained 7 days of performance history. This is a free tier, whereas the database insights advanced retains 15 months of performance history. And you may be asking, why is it 15 months? Or if I'm using performance insights, I have more flexibility into what I can set that retention to be. Well, for database insights advanced, the 15 months is specifically correlated to the duration that you can save metrics in CloudWatch, up to 15 months. And since they wanted to align the product in a way to which you would be able to have all of that telemetry data and all the enhanced metrics that they provide as a part of the advanced tier. Okay, so that's where you would configure. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. All right, and that and pretty much just kind of summarize everything. This is what we're going to walk through today, and we left a lot of time for questions or any kind of feedback you may have. So what I will do is I'm just going to go back to this main database insights page, and I want to open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions, if you wouldn't mind putting it in the chat, or if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear it as well. And I guess, Michael, if you want to put up the next slide, feel free to do that.
Yes, definitely. I'll go ahead and share it momentarily. Oh, we have a question from David.
Oh, yeah, I saw it. So there aren't any specific reports around that today. If you would like to see that, we have heard other customers talking about that as well. So I know the product team is aware, but if you could fill out the survey and ask those questions and say, I'd really like to see some reports on deadlocking that we could maybe export into a specific format, CSV or something, or on what you would like, that would be fantastic, because we'll roll it right up to the product team, and we'll make sure that they're aware that people are interested in that. Is there any way to see query plans in ODD status? There are ways to see query plans. I don't have it available here to show you, but let me show this real briefly, actually. Unfortunately, I don't have that configured today. Give me a second. I'm going to try to grab the share back. All right, you should. I'm just waiting to see it. You should see my screen now. So if I go into the database and I'm looking at Top SQL, which I don't have. Let me see. Let me go to this one. Go to fleets, service name, reports. Is it not letting me go over there? Trying to see, where did it go? There is a way to show plans. And you can also, there is a way to tell if the plan has flipped. I don't have that to present today, but we will be having another webinar where we go a bit deeper as the product continues to grow as well. But if you'd like, if you could provide that feedback as well, I could send you some specific information on that. I know, let me stop sharing again. I know we have specific documentation on that as well, specific to database insights, and I can send that your way.
All right. Here, Joe, I'll put up my screen to end it, and then
Sure. There you go.
Perfect. Well, everyone, thank you so much for your time here. Joe and I are going to end the recording, but we really appreciate your time. Feel free to reach out to your AWS contact, or you can reach out to Joe and I. And I'm really excited to have you get up and running with database insights and hopefully minimize that MTTR for you. All right. Have a great week.